What is art? These are carefully drawn details of the Renaissance period, where every fold of clothing seems to be alive. Or maybe it's the energetic brushstrokes of abstract artists that seem to break out of the boundaries of the canvas. Or maybe art is just an image of a can of tomato soup repeated dozens of times. If the latter option seems strange to you, then most likely you are not yet familiar with Andy Warhol, the man who changed the very essence of art, turning it into a mass consumption product. His works were both simple and provocative, accessible to everyone and, at the same time, incomprehensible. He painted cans of soup, Coca-Cola, portraits of celebrities, and called it art. Someone saw this as a brilliant artistic gesture, emptiness wrapped in a beautiful package. But who was Warhol himself? A brilliant artist, a prophet of the consumer era, or just a person who could sell any product at a high price, even if it was his own name? His career began in a poor immigrant family in Pittsburgh and ended in the upper circles of New York, where he moved among stars, politicians, and the rich. Today, his paintings sell for tens of millions of dollars, and his influence is felt in every corner of modern culture, from advertising to social networks. But how exactly did he achieve this? Was there calculated marketing in his success, or was it real art? And can his ideas be called relevant today? Let's figure it out. 1. Early years. How the disease made him different. Andy Warhol was born on August 6, 1928, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, into a family of poor immigrants. His parents, Andre and Julia Vargola, came to America from a small village in the Carpathian Mountains, which is now located on the territory of Slovakia. They were Ruthenians, deeply religious people, and raised their children in the traditions of the Greek Catholic Church. His father worked in a coal mine, a hard, dirty job that took away my health and strength. Mother, not knowing English, supported herself with odd jobs. She washed windows, cleaned houses. In addition, she sold flowers, which she made herself from cans and corrugated paper, as well as embroidered and painted Easter eggs. Despite her poverty, Julia tried to take care of her children, and Andy, the youngest of them, was especially protective. The family moved around a lot, but at some point they managed to get out of the slums and settle in a more decent neighborhood. Andy had two older brothers, Paul and John, and his nephew, Pavel's son, became an illustrator of children's books in the future. But even in this humble, difficult childhood, there were moments that shaped a future artist. When Andy was about 8 years old, he became seriously ill. Doctors diagnosed Edenam's chorea, known as St. Vitus dance, a disease that developed after scarlet fever. It was a heavy blow. The illness forced him to practically not get out of bed. School had to be abandoned, and peers, as is often the case with children, drifted away. He became an outcast. But once isolated, Andy discovered another world for himself, the world of art. The hours he spent alone were spent painting. His mother supported him, encouraging any creative endeavors. He made collages from newspapers, cut out images of movie stars, and copied magazine covers. It was at this time that his taste was formed, a sense of style appeared, and a love for visual images. Andy always said that this period of his life was a turning point for him. The illness hardened his character, made him more introverted, but at the same time helped him find what he wanted to do all his life. When Andy was 13 years old, tragedy struck. His father died in a mining accident. It was a blow to the whole family, but it was then that it became clear how much the father believed in his son. Before his death, he left his savings not for the needs of his family, but for Andy's education. He knew that his son was talented, and he wanted him to have a chance at a better life. In 1945, Andy graduated from high school and went to Carnegie Mellon Institute of Technology to study commercial art. This step was fateful for him. Soon the whole world will know the name Andy Warhol. 2. The path to art. From advertising to pop art. When Andy Warhol grew up, he did not become an artist in the classical sense of the word. He did not paint oil portraits, did not study human anatomy, and did not strive to be a part of the traditional artistic world. Instead, he chose commercial art, the world of advertising, fashion illustrations, and glossy magazines. And it was this choice that determined his path to pop art. In 1949, immediately after graduating from Carnegie Mellon Institute of Technology, he went to New York. For the young artist, it was a ticket to a completely different world. New York in the late 40s was bustling with life, abstract expressionism, jazz, theater, and fashion developed here. It was a city of opportunity, but at the same time a city of fierce competition. Visiting artists and designers dreamed of breaking into the industry, but not everyone succeeded. Warhol began by offering his work to various publications and advertising agencies. At first, he had to take any orders, to draw greeting cards, make sketches for shop windows, illustrate small articles. But soon he found his niche. He began to create advertising images for shoe brands and fashion houses. In the world of commercial illustration, precision of lines, accuracy and realism were valued back then. But Warhol went the other way. He developed his own special technique. First he painted with ink, and then deliberately added blots, streaks and random strokes. This made his drawings lively, dynamic, as if on the verge of chaos. At first, customers reacted to this with disbelief. They are used to more traditional advertising images, where everything should be perfect and flawless. But it soon became clear that Warhol's work attracted attention. They looked unconventional, broke the usual framework, created a sense of something new. So he started working with major fashion publications, Glamour, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. His style became more recognizable, and in the 50s he was already one of the most successful illustrators in New York. But his ambitions were not limited to commercial success. Despite his popularity in the advertising industry, Warhol understood that an illustrator is just a performer. He creates works to order, but does not leave his mark in history. And he wanted more. His dream was not just to paint. He wanted to change the very idea of what art is. At that time, abstract artists dominated New York. Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, Willem de Kooning. Their work was emotional, expressive, and full of philosophy. They reflected personal experiences. They were created in a fit of inspiration. There was nothing accidental about them. But Warhol saw art differently. He did not believe that a painting should be a reflection of the artist's soul. He looked at the world around him and realized that modern culture is filled with mass production, advertising, movie stars, and goods that are produced by millions. Why not make it art? He started looking for his niche. At first, his painting was close to traditional art, but he quickly realized that people no longer reacted to ordinary paintings. They need something new. At that moment, he remembered his advertising work. Why not use the same techniques in art? Why not turn mass culture into an object of creativity? In the early 60s, Andy Warhol made a decision that completely changed his life. He retired from the advertising business and decided to devote himself to art. But what exactly is considered art? This question tormented many artists of his time. While the abstract expressionists were trying to convey their emotions on canvas, Warhol looked at the world around him in a completely different way. He understood that the world was already living according to the laws of mass production and advertising. Art should no longer be unique. It should be recognizable. But how do you find the perfect symbol that captures the essence of the era? According to one version, the idea came by chance. One of his friends said to him, "Andy, why don't you draw something that you really love?" Warhol thought about it and replied, "I love Campbell's soup." That's how his famous 32 paintings of Campbell's cans appeared in 1962, one for each flavor of soup produced by the company. The critics were shocked. "Is this a joke?" Some asked. "It's brilliant." Others admired. Some saw this as a mockery of art. Others believed that Warhol had captured the very essence of consumer culture. But regardless of the opinions, his work was discussed. They evoked emotions, and that was the main success. Why tin cans? Not abstractions, not portraits, not complex compositions, but just an industrial image of an everyday product. The answer is simple. Warhol brilliantly realized that the world had changed. People were no longer attracted to complex artistic ideas. They lived in a world of brands, advertising, and mass production. Campbell's was a symbol of America. Millions of people ate this soup every day. It was simple, understandable and recognizable, and Warhol made it art. But he didn't just depict banks, he turned them into serial art. His work was repeated like goods on a supermarket shelf. They were not unique in the classical sense, and that was precisely what made them revolutionary. After the Campbell's soup exhibition, Warhol realized that he had found his formula. People like bright colors, repetitive images, and iconic symbols. He started using the same technique to create other works. Soon there were portraits of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Elizabeth Taylor. He mass-produced them using the silkscreen printing method, as in a factory. But was it an act of creativity, or just a commercial move? Critics argued, but the fact remained that his work was being bought. Warhol's idea worked flawlessly. He turned art into a product, and the artist into a brand. And after the Campbell's soup, his career took off to a new level. 3. The Warhol Factory. The center of pop culture by the early 60s, Andy Warhol was no longer just an artist. He was turning into a phenomenon. His art was sold, his style was copied, and his name was in the headlines. But he understood that paintings alone were not enough. Real art is not only about images, but also about the atmosphere around it. In 1964, Warhol opened his famous The Factory studio in New York, which became his personal art laboratory. It was a place where paintings were created. Silkscreen printing made it possible to replicate art, turning the process into something like factory production. Experimental films were shot. Warhol produced hour-long videos where people just stared at the camera or ate a hamburger. There were huge parties. These were not just parties, they were performances, real performances, where the boundaries between life and art were blurred. Life was in full swing here, all the rules were violated, and a new aesthetic was created. This place quickly became a pop culture hub. You could meet anyone here. Rock and movie stars, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Lou Reed, Salvador Dali, models and style icons, Edie Sedgwick, Nika, Bianca Jagger, bohemian and underground characters, writers, artists, eccentric personalities who became his muses. Anyone could come to the factory and feel like a part of something grandiose. But was Warhol an artist, or was he just using people? At the factory, he surrounded himself with strange, charismatic personalities, made them stars, and then abandoned them. Many of his muses ended badly. For example, Edie Sedgwick, an icon of the 60s, first became his main muse, and then, when she stopped being interesting, she was forgotten. But while some accused him of cynicism, others considered him a genius of the media era. Warhol created a cult of personality, in which the artist was as much a brand as his paintings. The higher Warhol rose, the more enemies he had, and his style irritated traditional artists. His popularity angered critics, and his eccentric personality attracted dangerous people. And in the late 60s, one of these people almost put an end to his career. 4. An assassination attempt and a new life. Throughout his life, Warhol created the illusion of invulnerability around himself. He played with art, people, money. He seemed to be getting away with everything. But in 1968, this illusion collapsed. On June 3, 1968, a woman entered the factory studio. It was Valerie Solanas, a writer, a radical feminist, and a marginal figure of New York bohemia. She had once moved in his circle, even starred in one of his films, but she believed that Warhol manipulated people and used them for his success. She pulled out a gun and shot Andy Warhol 3 times. The bullets pierced his chest, grazed his lungs, stomach, liver and esophagus. Doctors fought for his life for 9 hours. He survived clinical death, but survived by a miracle. After this incident, Warhol was forever left with a corset on his stomach, suffering from pain and panic attacks. This attempt was a turning point in his life. Before that, Warhol lived in a world of absolute freedom. His studio was open to everyone. He experimented with art, surrounded himself with eccentric people, and created new stars. But after the assassination attempt, everything changed. He became more careful. No more chaos, random people, and endless parties. He has moved away from radical experiments. Art was no longer about provocation, but about status and money. He turned himself into a brand. Now he created works that fit perfectly into the luxurious interiors of rich people. From that moment on, Warhol became a businessman. Art was no longer a game, it was pure capitalism. 5. Commercial Warhol. Art as a product. By the 70s, Warhol had finally become a symbol of glamour and elite society. He no longer rebelled against the system, he became a part of it. He understood the main principle of capitalist art. People want not just paintings, but status. And he gave them what they were waiting for. His new art was simple and profitable. $25,000 per painting. Portraits based on a template, bright colors, graphic, pop art style. Elite clients, politicians, stars, billionaires. Who commissioned his portraits? Jacqueline Kennedy is the widow of the President of the United States. Mick Jagger is a rock icon. Brigitte Bardot is a symbol of French cinema. Arab sheiks and royal families, because Warhol became fashionable and expensive. Each new portrait made him even richer and more popular. 6. Legacy and the main issue. By the end of his life, Andy Warhol had become something he himself mocked. He wanted to erase the boundary between art and commerce, and as a result, he turned into a living factory and mass-produced art like a product on an assembly line. He was saying, "I want to be a machine." And he became one. In February 1987, he went to the hospital for a routine gallbladder operation. It was an intervention that was not considered dangerous, but a day after the operation, complications occurred. Sudden arrhythmia, cardiac arrest. Warhol died in his sleep at the age of 58. His death was unexpected. It's ironic that a man who was afraid of hospitals and doctors all his life ended up dying in a hospital room. After his death, it turned out that his ideas had completely changed the culture. His influence is felt everywhere. Modern advertising is based on its principles. He was the first to realize that you can make a product iconic by simply repeating its image. Today it is used by Apple, Nike, Coca-Cola. Pop culture. He proved that a celebrity can be created artificially. Now millions of people are becoming popular on social media just by presenting themselves correctly. Fashion. By collaborating with designers, he has made art a part of the fashion industry. Today, brands such as Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Dior collaborate with artists precisely because of his influence. Social media. The idea that everyone can become a star for 15 minutes is now fully realized. Warhol predicted TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram back in the 60s. Today, Warhol's works are being sold for fabulous sums. In 2022, his portrait of Marilyn Monroe, shot Sage Blue Marlin, sold for $195 million, becoming the most expensive painting of the 20th century. But what exactly is appreciated about them? Art or a brand? Warhol himself said, "The best art is a good business." And his life proved that in the modern world, an artist is primarily a seller of his own idea. But who was he really? An artist who changed the way you think about art? Or the entrepreneur who first figured out how to sell emptiness? The answer is yours. We'll discuss this in the comments. And if you liked the video, subscribe, like it, and let's figure out how this world works.